A big snow keeps the legislature away, but they still have billions in bills to pay. We'll talk about it next on Capitol View. Welcome to Capitol View, the program where we talk about state of Illinois issues, sometimes federal issues, and how it just might affect your life. I'm Bernie Schoenburg from the State Journal-Register. With me today, we've got a wide geographical range represented at this small table. We have Bob Gough has made his way through the ice from Quincy. He's editor of quincynews.org. Also has, let's see, a lot of TV and newspaper experience in the past, correct?
Yes, sir. Thanks, Bernie.
Welcome back, Bob. Glad you made it safely. Scott Reeder is here. He is managing editor of Illinois Statehouse News, which provides all kinds of content to all kinds of media from the Statehouse to papers and stations and websites across the state. Scott, how many people you have working for you now over there?
We have 3 full-time staffers and 3 interns.
Things do move quickly in some parts of the media world. Anyway, welcome back.
Thank you.
And as we speak of this, the legislature was supposed to come in and did not because we had a big snow. Governor Quinn called out 500 members of the National Guard to help make sure that drivers could have assistance at rest stops and other places where they got stranded. Some of the worst pictures that I saw were out of Chicago on Lakeshore Drive, where about like 1,000 cars or more got stranded on Lakeshore Drive, and some people were waiting around in their cars for hours. As we come out of, as we thaw out of this situation, despite the cold temperatures, how did the state handle it, and what can you do in a situation like this?
Well, there were numerous instances where state trucks, especially on Illinois 104, which is between Quincy and Liberty out by the Quincy airport, the plows just couldn't get through. I mean, they were stuck Tuesday night. I mean, just came to a dead standstill. And then there was another incident north of Quincy as well where the same thing happened. It got so bad Tuesday night that about 8 o'clock, the Adams County Highway Department they just said we're not going to do this anymore. Yeah, well, they pulled off and they started again in daybreak. And you know, it really did. You know, you tried to go. I did manage to get out of my house Wednesday morning and tried to go find someplace with a cup of coffee about 9 o'clock, and there was nothing. It was a ghost town.
In Quincy?
In Quincy.
Downtown?
It was absolutely, the whole town was still in bad shape. So, but then, you know, eventually things got rolling, and school was out of session most of the week there, like it was here. And, you know, I think people are actually starting to kind of get a little bit of normalcy probably starting today and tomorrow.
Scott, you were interested, state employees got the day off?
Yes, I did. I thought it was curious.
Oh, except non-essential state employees.
Non-essential state employees, that's correct.
Those who aren't on the roads helping those people get out of their cars, etc.
I thought it was curious how the state chose to handle that, though. I mean, what they did is they gave everybody the day off, non-essential employees the day off with pay. And most private employers, the way they would handle it, if you couldn't make it into work, you would take a vacation day or you'd be docked a day's pay. There was apparently no consequence to non-essential state employees not coming to work. In fact, they got paid for not doing it.
Haven't they taken enough furlough days already, Scott?
Well, a very cynical me might point out that just last month that the governor signed a legislation raising the state income tax by 67%, and that's the equivalent
from 3 to 5%. Yes.
Yes, which would be the equivalent of one full working week. Pay disappearing for most of average Illinoisans. So I wouldn't think those average Illinoisans out there in the private sector who are having to buck it up and take a dock and pay for not going to work because they couldn't get out of their drive would be real happy to see that these folks are getting paid to essentially do nothing.
I'll bet somebody was sending something into work by computer, as some of us had to do.
Yes.
As our cul-de-sacs were not immediately plowed, although I have to laud the city workers who did do that at 3 a.m. the morning after. So anyway, I watched. It was very interesting.
But that's a great question for everybody to ask, though, because, I mean, the city of Quincy, City Hall was closed a couple days. The Adams County Courthouse was closed a couple days. I'm sure city halls and courthouses across the state were closed. It's a great question, because think of the dollars if everybody decided, hey, everybody's going to not have to use a personal day or not have to use a vacation day. It's a lot of money we're talking about.
Yeah, on the other hand, there was a safety factor because if people were not allowed to go home early as a blizzard is coming, then what do you do? I mean,
but here's the flip question of that. I mean, essential employees like state prison guards, state troopers, DOT workers, if they couldn't get out of their driveway or if they couldn't get to work, they were docked a day's pay, or they were docked or a vacation day. So you have to ask yourself, gee, are the snowdrifts deeper on the way to the state prison than they are to the state office building? I mean...
Well, perhaps it is worth more discussion, and we'll see if anything comes out. On the other hand, in a very occasional crisis, this was probably the worst storm in central Illinois in at least 10 and maybe 20 or 30 years. That maybe some allowances could be made, but perhaps I'm just a softie. Anyway, we'll see. Given all of this, the legislature did not come into session and will be coming into session next week. One of the big pieces of business remaining that didn't get passed by the lame duck session before the new legislature got sworn in early January was part of the financial plan that the Quinn administration has to borrow something like $8 billion to pay off existing bills to try to catch up so that they can then, pay off that new debt over time along with all the other debt they have, but perhaps get current with more of the state suppliers and providers of services that have gone, months in backlog and not being paid for a long time. Any thoughts on chances of this happening with Democrats generally for and Republicans against?
I don't think it's going to happen.
Because?
I think Republicans...
And we need some Republican votes to do it because to borrow you need an extraordinary majority, more than the Democrats now have.
Yes, I think that the Republicans are doing everything they possibly can to exploit a very partisan vote to increase taxes, and they're going to portray themselves as the stalwarts that are fighting back for fiscal responsibility, never mind that if you borrow this money, you're going to be able to pay back the vendors quickly and do other things. I just don't see the Republicans seeing anything for them to gain politically by putting votes on that. Now, I wouldn't be surprised at the end of the legislative session when all deals start getting made, and if they need Republican votes for that, Republicans trading off to get something in return. But I don't think we're going to see it in the next couple of months at least.
I totally agree. This is going to be something that's going to be a deadline issue. It'll go down to the end of session, and then, if somebody wants something, they'll Christmas tree up the bill and add them a couple of things.
Yeah, well, and some of the speculation around this table in the past as well has been maybe the drawing of the new legislative map, which is supposed to happen after census figures come out this year, will possibly have something to do with that. If you want the possibility of having a district from which you can be reelected, then perhaps you ought to go along. On the other hand, that 66 or 2 percentage point increase in our state income tax was only passed with Democratic votes, as it turned out, after Democrats had wanted Republican votes on it for the last few years, and it just didn't happen. So is the redistricting thing that kind of lever, do you think?
I would think so. I mean, I think if that's something you want to hold out for, you don't think that's enough? I mean, I think what else? Are there going to be bigger fish that they would want out of this than that? I mean, I think that's a pretty big carrot.
I think that it's a pretty lousy piece of leverage for such a big.
Okay. Didn't you say they would never pass a tax increase?
I said they never passed a tax increase while Rod Blagojevich was governor.
Oh, okay, well, I didn't realize all of the... And you were right about that, weren't you? Of course, the former governor did put out a statement after it passed,
of course he did,
saying, I told you so, but I'm not sure people care that much, as it turns out. Speaking of our state's economy, I've heard and seen advertisements from Chris Christie, the governor of New Jersey, which is another state that's pulling its way out of a financial crisis or within one. He actually came to Illinois to campaign for Bill Brady, who wanted no new taxes in Illinois and was the Republican who lost a narrow loss to Pat Quinn. But New Jersey is now airing ads saying, Illinois businesses, please come to our state. We believe in low taxes. Do we think any Illinois businesses are going to uproot and head to New Jersey? because of this? Is this a worthwhile expenditure of New Jersey's funds?
But you know, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Wisconsin and Indiana are doing this as well. We have New Jersey doing this. I think it's very possible we're going to lose some significant businesses, particularly businesses that, like trucking, other things that can be based anywhere. I mean, that aren't married to some particular piece of geography. I wouldn't be, and more importantly, I think you're going to see a lot of businesses, when it comes time to reinvest, making a decision, do we want to spend more money here on our existing Illinois operation, or do we want to expand in a different state where the taxes are lower? So I think there's some validity to that.
With Quincy being a border community, this is a huge issue.
Yeah,
there's a lot of saber rattling in the Quincy business community now, talking about this and really weighing their options and trying to look at land over in Marion County, Missouri, which is right across the river. And that's, I mean, it's something that the discussion. There was a lot of that talk when the GRT was being bandied about.
The gross receipts tax
yes.
that Rod Blagojevich wanted on business transactions.
Yes. So there was
of course, he claimed it wasn't a real tax because it was only on business, and it would have been bigger than this one.
Oh,
but
yeah,
that's Rod. So go ahead.
But yeah, this is the same kind of talk we're hearing out of the Quincy business community that we heard about that same time. One interesting thing to point out: Quincy's trying to position itself as a green energy community with this hydroelectric development at locks and dams all up and down the Mississippi River, at 3 of them anyway. But to do this, they have to base the powerhouse and base a lot of this over in Missouri. And apparently in this one situation, the property tax hit is something that the local officials didn't factor in, that the property tax hit in Missouri for that thing is about $1.4 million a year, whereas it was going to be actually less in Illinois. But the way the dam's set up and the way the configuration works, they have to have it in Missouri. So that's one instance where it was kind of surprising with all this talk about Missouri being a lower tax state and these businesses wanting to move. This one instance, which is going to be a private public partnership, that there's a chance that Missouri's tax rate may actually be higher.
And I'm not sure that Governor Quinn has used the words exactly "bring it on," but he has said compare all of the factors. Look at the Premier of China, who recently visited America, and we hope Scott's okay, you're going to make it, who recently visited America and went to, from Washington to Chicago. He didn't go to New Jersey. He didn't go to Milwaukee. He went to Chicago because it's a, international center of business too. So he's trying to say, hold on, if you factor in lots of things, and even some of the tax rates are comparable, or these other states that are saying, look at us, maybe they have a combination of taxes, maybe even their sales, I'm not sure, or income tax that don't compare as well with Illinois.
Well, Quincy has lost one longtime corporation, Gardner-Denver Corporation, which was a 150-year-old company in Quincy. They are moving their corporate headquarters to Philadelphia. And
was that in the works before?
But that was really in the works beforehand, and the state of Pennsylvania put together a pretty sweet deal. Plus, the CEO of Gardner-Denver happens to be from there anyway.
Well,
it's a little bit of a red herring to bring that up, but it is a point that yes, Quincy does have one corporate office that is
I have a colleague at the Journal-Register, Doug Finke, who writes a column as well, and said, watch out now, everything that happens with business moving is going to be blamed on the tax. Sure. And I'm glad you didn't do that, but I'm sure other people are. Very interesting. Beyond budget issues, something pretty significant happened in Illinois within the last several days when Governor Quinn was in Chicago and signed the bill making civil unions legal in the state. He signed the bill. It takes effect, I believe, is it June 1st? I think so. Which I know is odd because it's not quite into the next fiscal year. It's with a month left in the current fiscal year. But signed it in Chicago. Had an array of top state officials. I think some from both parties, but I know our Attorney General Lisa Madigan was there. I saw, and you had sponsors of the bill from both houses. And just wonder, it certainly is something that would not have been seen had, I mean, this was a Pat Quinn thing. Did they pass that in the veto session? I think they did.
Yes, they did.
But the fact that he waited until now to sign it, well, it's something he couldn't have done if he wasn't governor anymore, and Bill Brady wasn't going to sign this bill. So it does show kind of a certain progressivism, if that's the right word, in Illinois. Is that a good thing or a bad thing? Any thoughts on this, gentleman, on where Illinois is? I'm sure, you know, there was, I think the papers in Chicago, the editorials were very supportive of this, that it's a new day, and you know, we're moving into the next century where there's less discrimination based on personal orientation.
I mean, you know, it was bound to happen, and I think, you know, the moves are going to be made, and Pat Quinn had this one of the kind of things he had thrown out there, making it effective June 1st. I guess I'll stay away from any June wedding jokes or anything like that, but since it's not really a wedding, but it's something that I think.
And it's actually not only same-sex couples,
right.
Truly, because that was actually. Representative in the House who did this, Greg Harris, noted that there are some older folks, and I'm not sure, it sounds a little odd to me, if you want to keep your benefits from your past spouse, you can have a civil union with, you know, and your past spouse has passed away, you can not get married to somebody else but have a civil union with them of heterosexual couples, and then, you know, have the rights of visitation in hospitals and other personal decisions that civil unions brings.
But I think the big thing with this is, you know, this is something that, you know, it happens, so be it. I think there are so many other issues that the state has to worry about right now. Kind of, you know, let that one go and worry about the fiscal responsibility, the fiscal problems that this state is having. I mean, I think those are the things right now. That's got to be number one, and everything else, including civil unions, has to be a distant second right now.
Interesting. I think a more local situation that has hit the city of Springfield just in the last few days is the news that came out that the Illinois Department of Agriculture said that the National High School Finals Rodeo, which is a national rodeo for high school kids, who are very rough and tough because I couldn't ride those animals like they do, but and there are some animal activists that don't like it anyway. However, there was a whole arena built at the state fairgrounds under George Ryan. This national show spends 2 years one place and then another place and then another. Illinois has been in that rotation a couple times, and this is supposed to come back in 2012 and 13, but now the Department of Ag says, thanks but no thanks, you can't come anymore because we can't afford to spend $1 million a year that it costs for us to help you put on that show. And then Frank Edwards, who happens to be a Republican in the nonpartisan position of mayor of Springfield, got very upset, as have others in town, saying, wait a minute, we've made a deal with these people. We want them to come here and spend their money in our gas stations and restaurants, et cetera, and now the state says no. Well, interestingly, people don't want higher taxes, but this, you know, expenditure is one that local officials are very unhappy is not being made as tourism incentive, because they say we spend so much money advertising our state now to tell people, and there could be a ripple effect on others who might want to come here, we don't want you to come even after we made a deal, sends the wrong message. So what do we think the state should do? He's also angry that, at least initially, the governor's office wasn't quick to return phone calls when the mayor, and there was no notice in advance to City of Springfield officials that this decision had been made and communicated to the rodeo folks out west.
Well, I think there's several issues here. One is, as you said, people don't want to pay higher taxes, but guess what? We are going to be paying higher taxes. So the tax increase went through. Part of it is an issue of commitment. I mean, these people were made an offer, they accepted it, and then they got the rug pulled out from under them by the state, and with very little notice to with no notice to the city, to the other parties involved. To me, it struck me as something you would expect from the past administration, not the current one, and how they handle the situation. I think that there's some real issues there as how is Illinois perceived? Is it keeping its commitments? Not so much, you know, I think it's open game to to debate on whether we should be funding this economic development enterprise here, but I think it's strange to be debating it after a deal was cut and made, and then to be pulling the funding from it. I mean,
yeah. Well, and the idea was that the state they have to make cuts, and they found a place to make them. Well, but it's difficult.
I mean, you know, the way this budget crisis is, you know, yes, they raised the taxes, but there has to be cuts in there along with that, and you know, this is just one of them. Now, but Scott's right. I mean, if there's a deal in place where they've got this rotation set up, and hey, they're supposed to have this, I think the honorable thing to do is to say, okay, this is the last time.
Exactly.
We've got to be out of the rotation after this. This is it, guys. Plan ahead. dead. You're not going to have this anymore. Is that going to make the Springfield folks, is it going to make others any happier? No. But at least it's kind of an honorable way to say, look, this is it. We are going to eliminate this from future budgets.
Yeah, and your planning up to this point is not in vain.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely.
Because, yeah, interesting. Well, we will see where that goes because, again, the budget continues to be a tough problem, and so does trying to get people to come to Illinois. I wanted to talk again about, and we've talked about this in other weeks, the capital plan of the state of Illinois is still up in the air, which the appellate court has said that this $30+ billion building plan is unconstitutional because the bill contained too many different elements that didn't all fit together, because you're supposed to have a bill about one issue. But the Attorney General has now gotten the Supreme Court to say the plan can continue until the Supreme Court decides if they'll uphold that. Any thoughts? I guess construction continues, or at least it will, during the construction season.
There are so many projects in the works. I know the Illinois Veterans Home at Quincy, which houses about 500 veterans. They've got about $12 million worth of renovations and work that are being funded by this, and they're already in the works. I mean, the contracts are drawn. They've got local contractors involved in this. So something along those lines, it's kind of tough to stop that. On the other hand, Quincy has also, part of this, been given $6 million for a new intermodal station that will house the Amtrak station, the local buses, and they want to put the transit service there, and they also want to have taxis come there. And I've kind of called it a mini Union Station, which is kind of tough when you only have 2 trains coming to town. But so that's something else that while that process is that project's certainly still on the drawing board, that is something where Quincy's really looking at this and saying, well, the city wants this thing badly, but we did a poll on this thing when it was first announced, and about 65% of the citizens said, why are we doing this? We have a much better use of our money. Well, the other big sticker is, yes, you're going to get $6 million from the state, but in order to move the tracks and to do everything else you need to do, it's about a $16 million project. And the city's trying to build the hydroelectric plants. They'd like a new port authority. There's all kinds of projects that they have going on, and people in the city of Quincy are starting to wonder, where are we going to get the money to do all of this? Because it seems that right now the city officials and our economic development leaders are throwing a lot of stuff against the wall and just kind of trying to see what sticks and what gets legs. But again, this downtown, and right now Amtrak's on the northern edge of town, kind of in the outskirts of town. They want to move it downtown. They want it to be they want to kind of generate some activity down there. But my position has been, how are you going to generate activity when you have one train that leaves at 6 a.m. and then you have one that gets there at 5 p.m. and another that gets there at 10 p.m. I just don't see how you're going to be able to build a lot of economic development and a lot of a restaurant and some sort of downtown atmosphere around that.
Is any of the high-speed improvements, are they headed in that direction? Because that, of course, remains a big issue in Springfield, and which corridor through downtown that will go through. But that was stimulus money that the state is still supposed to be getting about $8 billion of for those improvements. We'll see how that goes. Before we finish the show, there was a passing recently of someone who has had a big influence on folks who are in our business and over at the Capitol. Sam Gough is his name. For many years, he was the head of the Institute of Government and Public Affairs, which studies all of this stuff at the University of Illinois. He was also apparently a driving force in doing the research that led up to the 1970 Constitutional Convention, which gave us the state constitution. And he, for a long time, I believe, ran the intern program that brought people like a young Jim Edgar to Springfield. So, Scott, I think you knew Sam or of Sam, and just any thoughts on, it's interesting how some people can have a big effect on what all of us watch.
That's for sure. I mean, I interviewed him a number of times. Brilliant man. In fact, when I first moved to Springfield to be a Statehouse bureau chief, a guy by the name of Jim Nolan gave me a book written by Sam and suggested that I read it because he's the definitive authority on state government, he said. And it was a very good book, and it's a real loss to the state of Illinois because this guy really was one of those people who understood the process, not just what, I guess, the textbook process, but what really happens in the State House. And He was a brilliant guy.
He was, and you know, every once in a while in Springfield there are these conferences that draw together folks to say what's going to happen in the next election, what happened. A lot of this is kind of based on the process that Sam Gough got going, and it's just it helps us, and he's one of those folks who will be missed. We've just got a few minutes left. Perhaps we could look northward a bit. The mayor's race in Chicago has been kind of interesting because Rahm Emanuel, who I guess there are now radio ads running of when President Obama said what a great chief of staff he was and he couldn't say no to me, I needed him, is back on the ballot after an appellate court took him off the ballot, and then the Supreme Court put him back on and was very critical of the appellate court for saying that when you're in service to your country, being chief of staff to the president, that means you're not a resident of Chicago anymore. And Carol Moseley Braun, our former U.S. Senator, is another chief candidate there who has been kind of gaffe-prone this time around.
This time around? This time around?
Well, I think more so than in the past. You know, she recently, one of the very lesser candidates the other day, Carol Moseley Braun said that, you know, when that person challenged Moseley Braun for disappearing from the public scene for a while, she said, well, the only reason you don't know what I was doing is because you were on crack. You can't really say that, and she finally apologized after the newspapers called for it. How much should people in Central Illinois care about who the next mayor of Chicago is, and how's it looking for Emanuel?
Well, Chicago is it's the big dog. I mean, there's no doubt about it. So what happens in Chicago, we feel the reverberations down here in downstate Illinois. So I think you have to pay a little bit of attention, and this surely does have the appearance of a coronation more so than an election. And again, I think it'd be a big upset if Emanuel lost, and I hope somebody makes it close. I hope somebody makes a run of it, and you know, he really needs to start coming up. Well, he probably doesn't need to. He doesn't think he needs to, but he's not offering a lot of specifics right now, especially when it comes to the tax plans or lack thereof, or how he's going to get Chicago out of its financial situation, which is just as bad as the one in the state of Illinois.
Well, we shall see. It is Super Bowl weekend, if we're allowed to say that on public TV, and Illinois State Police and Department of Transportation and folks are going to have something like 500 roadside safety checks, so be careful out there. And I guess some other time we'll discuss if that's a good idea or bad. But to Bob Gough and Scott Reeder, thanks for joining me. I'm Bernie Schoenburg, and thank you for joining us. We'll see you next time on Capitol View.